My name is May. For 81 years I've been a mother, a wife, a keeper of this family's stories. But one phone call, one single piece of paper, and I discovered the story we told was a beautiful poisoned fairy tale. This isn't just about stolen valor. This is about a son who tried to bury his own mother alive to hide his sin. And this is how I dug my way out. It was a Tuesday. The sun was too bright. My son Samuel was in the kitchen making me tea. He'd been so attentive since his father's funeral. Thought it was grief. I was a fool. The man from the Veterans Affairs office was polite, but his words were daggers. Mrs. Thompson, the serial numbers on the medals presented at your son Harold's funeral. They belong to your late husband, William. There's been a fraud. My heart stopped. I looked at Samuel. Samuel, the V. They said Harold's medals were his father's. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He took the phone from my hand. Mother, you're confused. Let me handle this. I heard him, his voice smooth as silk, telling the man on the other end, "This is Samuel Thompson. I'm sorry, my mother has been very unwell since my brother's death. Confused, forgetful. Please direct all further correspondence to me." He hung up. "I am not confused," I told him, my voice trembling with a dawning horror. He knelt before me and his voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "Aren't you? Who will believe you? The little old lady who can't remember what she had for breakfast? Or the devoted son who manages all her affairs? Now be a good mother and forget this ever happened." In that moment I didn't feel anger. I felt a heartbreak so profound it was silent. My own child. He didn't just steal his father's honor. He looked me in the eye and called me a liar to save his own skin. The boy I raised was gone. And the war began. So I let him believe he'd won. I became the woman he described. I misplaced my glasses. I asked the same question 3 times. I let him pat my hand and call me poor confused mother. And he grew arrogant. He got sloppy. Inside I was colder and clearer than I had ever been. The grief for my lost son was packed away in ice. And in its place was a single burning point of purpose. People like Samuel never notice when you switch the game on them. They assume you're playing checkers while they're playing chess. They see the slow moves, the apparent simplicity, and they mistake it for a lack of strategy. But they forget, old minds have lived through more battles than young ones can imagine. We have navigated loss, outlasted despair, and negotiated peace in the quiet wars of marriage and motherhood. We know that the most decisive victories are won not with a barrage of noise, but with a single, perfectly timed silence. He thought he was manipulating a fading old woman. He had no idea he was provoking a seasoned general. My first move was a small black voice recorder my granddaughter had given me years ago. For remembering your thoughts, Nana. I found it in a drawer buried under sewing supplies. It became my most powerful weapon. I documented everything. I created a logbook in a simple cipher, disguised as grocery lists and gardening notes. Milk, eggs, bread, S. Discussed VA at 3:15 p.m. Denied knowledge. Weed the petunias, us. Intercepted certified mail from Financial Review, but every word of manipulation, every piece of mail he tried to intercept, every suspicious document he brought for me to sign with that fake look of concern on his face, it all went into the record. I was building a cage for him and he was happily handing me the bars one by one. You might ask, why didn't I confront him then? Why didn't I shout the truth in his face? Unleash the torrent of betrayal and hurt that threatened to choke me every time he called me Mom, in that syrupy tone. Because shouting doesn't win wars. It merely announces your position to the enemy. Quiet does. Silence allows you to listen, to learn, to maneuver. And I didn't just want to stop him. I wanted him to understand the depth of his miscalculation. I wanted him to drown in the very silence he underestimated. The investigation unfolded with a grim, inevitable momentum. My first call wasn't to the police, but to a young, earnest-sounding woman named Sarah at the National Personnel Records Center. I used my sweetest, most confused old lady voice, explaining that I was trying to get a replacement flag for my late husband, William, and was getting conflicting information. She was wonderfully helpful. The VA, prompted by my earlier call, sent me copies of service records. My late husband's, not Harold's. The documents were a revelation. Dates, units, missions, all under William Thompson's name. My William. Meanwhile, the medals awarded at Harold's funeral were tied to classified operations in regions William had spoken to me about in hushed, pained whispers during his darkest nights, places Harold had never been. My husband never wanted recognition. He carried the weight of what he'd seen and done in silence, a burden our marriage shared. But Harold was impulsive, temperamental. He wasn't even in the same division as the medals claimed. How could he have earned honors that belonged to his father? The answer was as simple as it was vile. He didn't. Someone had forged documents. Someone wanted the substantial financial benefits and pensions associated with those high-level decorations. Someone wanted power of attorney over me, the aging mother, to control not just my present but my past. Someone wanted access to my estate, to the life insurance, to the house that William and I had built with our love and labor. And that someone was Samuel, my firstborn. The baby I had rocked to sleep, whose skin knees I had kissed, whose heart I had tried to shield from the world. The evidence became undeniable one Tuesday morning. He'd been called away abruptly, something about a missed meeting at the bank. In his haste, he'd forgotten to lock his briefcase. The brass clasp was just open. An invitation. Or a test. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a bony cage. This was a line, and crossing it would change everything. I listened for the sound of his car, the silence of the house pressing in on me. Then with a deep breath I lifted the lid. The smell of leather and ambition wafted out. And there was, not hidden but nestled among legitimate-looking bank statements, a forged signature. My signature. It was a good forgery, I'll give him that, the looping from my younger days before the arthritis. It was on a letter requesting the transfer of my assets into a trust with him as the sole trustee. Another letter on VA letterhead he must have stolen or replicated, requesting survivor benefits, using Harold's fake hero narrative to siphon money meant for a true hero's family. The villain wasn't some opportunistic nurse or a greedy lawyer. It was my own son. My own flesh. The child I had carried for 9 months, now carrying a plan to bury me alive in a legal tomb of his own making. My breath caught, a physical pain in my chest as I saw the depth of his betrayal. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to hold the cold, hard proof in your hands. The paper felt filthy. But I swallowed the hot, bitter hurt. I knew emotion would cloud my judgment, and I could not afford to be clouded. Not now. So with hands that refused to shake, I pressed record on the device in my pocket. I laid each document on the floor, photographing them with the camera phone my granddaughter had insisted I learn to use. For emergencies, Nana, she'd said. She had no idea. I captured every damning line, every fraudulent flourish. Then, with the precision of a bomb disposal expert, I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it. Not a paper out of order. Not a hair out of place. I needed him to remain confident, arrogant. Confidence makes villains sloppy, and I needed him at his sloppiest for the final act. The next phase was the hardest, maintaining the act while the net tightened. I scheduled appointments for a full cognitive evaluation. Samuel smirked when I mentioned it, a quick, ugly twist of his lips he thought I didn't see. "Of course, Mother," he'd said, oozing false reassurance. I'll be there to support you. We'll get through this together." What he didn't know was that I had already visited Dr. Evans the week before. I had sat in her office, the recorder in my purse, and told her everything. I showed her the photos, played her snippets of Samuel's conversations. "I need you to treat me as though I'm declining," I'd told her, my voice steady. "In your notes be vague. Note patient confusion and variable recall. Please. For my safety." She had looked at me, this brilliant no-nonsense woman, and her eyes had softened with a profound understanding. She didn't patronize me. She simply nodded, a soldier accepting a mission. "I understand, May," she'd said. And she wrote the notes exactly as I needed them. Not lies, just carefully worded observations that gave Samuel no ammunition, while documenting the real problem: the systemic psychological abuse by a family member. Meanwhile, the VA investigator, a stern man named Mr. Croft with eyes that missed nothing, was digging deeper. He uncovered anomalies in the funeral home arrangements. Missing documentation. Incorrect unit numbers that didn't match any active roster from Harold's supposed deployment dates. Signatures on benefit forms that didn't match Harold's youthful scrawl but bore a striking, damning resemblance to Samuel's practiced hand. When Mr. Croft informed me of this over a secure line, I pretended shock. I practiced my reaction in the mirror. That evening, I cried in front of Samuel, real tears born of a lifetime of love now curdled, but presented as the tears of a confused old woman. He hugged me, shushing me like a child, promising everything would be okay. His voice dripped with a fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. And through my sobs, the recorder in my dressing gown pocket captured every single hypocritical syllable. The real showdown came at the family meeting I arranged. I invited my nephews, my pastor, the unflappable Mr. Croft from the VA, and our family lawyer, a man who had handled William's will. Samuel walked in confidently, carrying a clipboard and that smug entitlement that had become his second skin. "Mother," he said, his voice a masterclass in controlled irritation, "why did you call everyone here? This is all so unnecessary. You should be resting." His tone was coated in that particular brand of false concern that screams its own insincerity. I looked at him, letting my eyes appear tired and watery, my voice trembling with a carefully measured weakness, just enough to keep him unaware, to make him feel secure in his dominance. "Samuel, baby. I need help understanding these papers. You've been so helpful." I gestured vaguely to the table. He relaxed. The hook was set. He saw a final, easy victory. I reached slowly under my chair and placed a simple cardboard box on the table. It was the same box that had once held his first pair of proper leather shoes. The irony was not lost on me. Inside, the voice recorder, printed transcripts of his conversations, the photos of the forged documents, and the official verification letter from Mr. Croft. Everyone stared as I pressed play. His voice, clear and unmistakable, echoed through the room, shattering the polite silence. "Don't worry, Mom, you won't remember signing anything. I'll take care of the estate when you're gone. It's not like you'll have a use for it. Nobody will question it. You can barely keep track of your glasses anymore. They'll just think you're a forgetful old woman." His face drained of color, passing from confusion to dawning horror to a sickly, gray pallor. He looked like a man who had just stepped into an abyss he never knew was there. Mr. Croft spoke next, his voice a calm, legalistic hammer driving the nails into Samuel's coffin. He stated clearly and without emotion that the medals belonged to my husband, William, and that the funeral honors and subsequent benefit claims for Harold were fraudulently obtained, constituting multiple federal offenses. A wave of gasps and muttered exclamations filled the room. My family lawyer rose, his face a thundercloud, his voice stern. "Mrs. Thompson, did you collect this evidence yourself?" I looked directly into Samuel's terrified, pleading eyes and I said, my voice steady and clear as cut glass, yes. I may be old, but I am not broken. Silence. Heavy, suffocating, absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. My nephews were on their feet, shouting. My pastor had his head in his hands. Samuel stuttered, his hands shaking, sweat gathering at his temples and upper lip. He tried to argue, his voice rising to a desperate pitch, claiming I was confused, unstable, that I was being manipulated by Mr. Croft, that I didn't understand what I was doing. But the recordings, his own voice played back to him in this room of witnesses, crushed every argument before it could fully form. Every person in that room saw the truth laid bare. The masks he had worn for years, the caring son, the responsible brother, burned away in the unforgiving light of evidence, revealing the desperate, avaricious predator beneath. He tried to storm out, a final, pathetic act of defiance, but Mr. Croft, a large man, moved to block the doorway. I think you'll need to stay, son, he said, his voice low. We have a lot to discuss with the authorities. The fight went out of Samuel then. He shrank into his chair, shoulders slumped, utterly defeated. His downfall was complete, and it was more humiliating than any shouting match could ever have been. As he sat there, a shell of the man he pretended to be, I spoke softly, not in anger but in grim revelation. Son, the strength you mistook for weakness was silence. The wisdom you ignored was observation. You were so busy watching for my mind to fail that you never saw my spirit fortify. You thought I was losing my mind. But I was watching you lose your soul. The room was still once more, the truth hanging in the air, stark and undeniable. And for the first time in a long, terrifying while, I felt safe. The war was over. That night, as I sat alone in my quiet living room, the ghosts of the day finally settling, I realized something profound. The world fears the loud, the immediate, the explosive. But sometimes the greatest power is in choosing when to speak, in the disciplined restraint that lets the truth gather weight and momentum like a thundercloud, until its final, inevitable strike is loud enough to be heard for generations. People will always underestimate the quiet ones. They will mistake contemplation for vacancy and patience for passivity. Let them. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means watching. Quiet means preparing. Quiet means choosing the perfect moment to rise. They think age makes you weak. They mistake silence for surrender. But a lifetime of love gives you a strength they can't imagine. And when that love is betrayed, it forges a resolve of pure steel. Do not underestimate the quiet ones. We're always watching. And we always remember. If this story of a truth too long buried resonated with you, do not keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Elderly Whispers, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and ring that bell so you don't miss my next story. Because the world is loud, but the truth is a whisper. And I am its keeper.